I want to bring in now my experts, my legal analyst, Laura Coates, constitutional attorney Pate, and senior political analyst David Gergen. Good evening to all of you for this special edition of CNN Tonight. August Flingy, the government lawyer, was peppered with questions, tough questions, by the three judges. Here's one exchange.
These proceedings have been moving quite fast, and we're doing the best we can. I can cite...
You're saying that the proceedings are moving fast, but you appealed to us before you continued in the district court to develop the record. So why should we be hearing this now if it sounds like you're trying to say you're going to present other evidence later?
Well, I was just about to at least mention a few examples.
Interesting. So he had to defend an executive order that was written when the Attorney General wasn't even confirmed, written with no input from the Justice Department. Did the White House hurt themselves by moving too fast to get this order signed? That's for you, Laura.
Well, I think they did, because of course you had Sally Yates, who was just fired a few weeks ago for having the same argument of, I don't know how we're going to be able to defend this case. Not that there was an ultimate conclusion, but the same argument that she had back then was, this is difficult to actually be able to defend, and you saw that today in the court. But most importantly here, what you had is a lack of preparedness with respect to one really primary issue. What was the substantive, factual basis for having these 7 countries named? The government assumed they were going to be able to say, our biggest gun is the national security issue here. The president has a prerogative, do what he wants in national security, and you have to take our word for it. And the court said to him today, is it hypothetical, or is this a real live national security concern? And they did not have the evidence there to support it yet.
It's very interesting, Al. So let's discuss this now. Laura, the oral argument was fascinating. What stood out to you, and who do you think made the better case here?
You know, what stood out to me was the fact that the court was really trying to be even-handed in their peppering of questions to both Washington State and the DOJ. But I think that the DOJ's arguments were less persuasive, and here's why. They hung their hat in their case oftentimes on this national security carte blanche that we give to the President of the United States when it comes to national security interests. But besides that, they actually have a basis as to why they thought that was the winning argument. And the court said, look, we understand that's an issue and that's a carte blanche you'd like to give, but it's got to be real. It's got to be hypothetical. And if the emperor has on no clothes, we're going to call you out on it.
I feel like a court show now. I know this is all very interesting to you guys, but I have no idea what is going on here. But it sounds like the president's own words about banning Muslims may come back to haunt him. Is that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I found, at least from Washington's standpoint, very encouraging about these questions. These judges, even at this stage of the litigation, are willing to look into the constitutional arguments, and they wanted to see, is there enough evidence here of actual discrimination? If they were not interested in those arguments, if the constitutional review doesn't apply to the president's power to enforce immigration and national security, you wouldn't have heard those questions.
But here's the problem, and in all fairness to DOJ in this particular instance, you know, they would like the court to look at the 4 corners they kept talking about of the actual document. There is really no specific mention of a Muslim ban in the executive order. Now, we all turn a side eye and kind of raise our eyebrows and say, this sounds pretextual as a basis. But the court is essentially saying to them, look, if I see no intent that's actually laid out here, do I really have the authority as a judge to go back to candidate Trump and use his views? What they're all getting at right now is that Giuliani's interview talking about the idea of Trump allegedly coming to him and saying, I have an idea, try to make this legal for me. And that's what they're all trying to go back to. And if this is in fact a pretextual reason, we're saying national security and we really mean Muslim ban, the court wants to know.
All right, guys, that's going to be the last word, at least in this segment. I want to turn now to the travel ban in court for Page. I want to get Page and Laura's opinion on this. So what happens next? Was tonight a good night for the administration, or we don't know?
I think it was a good night. I think we learned 2 things. One, I think these judges are certainly prepared to recognize that the states have standing to pursue this lawsuit. And the second thing I think we learned is that they're going to look behind the president's statement that this is all about national security. You can't look and see what I'm doing. Take my word for it. I think the judges indicated through their questioning, like you pointed out earlier, there's Article 2 powers that the president has, and they're pretty broad, but there are all these little pesky amendments that come after that, and they govern the limitations on what a president can and cannot do.
Yeah.
So here's the problem. We talk about the government winning in this case. You have two governments that are really battling it. You have the state and you've got the federal government who are battling over really the same rights of the same citizens. So people are very confused by who to root for. And ultimately you root for the Constitution. And so the court is going to have to balance two very important things. One, the prerogative of a president. We all know we want to have national security. We all want to be safe against the very real threat to our constitutional rights. And so this is a lesson in what it takes and what's required to be on the same page. It's like watching an octopus try to put on its socks in this administration. It really is.
That's an interesting way of putting it.